if it does encourage larger, because otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do, to make cuts. And
No, I didn't.
it does encourage, but there's no reason to exclude them. They're less. I mean,
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I was just thinking about this.
It's a lot smaller backside of the other small ones out.
Jernigan. Said I can work my way around.
Yeah, change it.
Oh, yeah, Jernigan.
I have a question for you. I'm trying to tell you. Yeah, well, oh, yeah, when you're, I remember it was really beautiful, but I didn't, so, okay. Longboards,
They're worthless.
short longboards.
Okay.
I don't know.
Those are called tax counts.
I told them I have to do the name, and I really accepted it.
It's cheaper than the cat.
It's cheaper than doing. A whole lot less work.
And then how much is it?
Oh, no. Okay. Depends on what size.
A baby.
What's
What's its
what's its weight? 600 pounds? That's, the last time I bought anything like
So you know anything about it?
Taxes, the taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the rest of the no issue, and you don't have to worry about that. All I gotta do is add water.
Or just that, yeah, so you can put your cows on my property and then you all the rest.
I gotta.
Maybe $1 worth or something.
Yeah, cheap.
I'm sorry.
That's a big difference.
Oh, yeah.
The goats were just too much work with the cat. Yeah, so
We had a
no,
family.
it's like you can't go out. Gotta get back to the dark. In the morning, there's one out. It's just, you can't go away. Just go.
Where'd you get
Because I gotta wait for all.
That's why you're all pressed.
Okay.
Turn on your microphones, you need to tap them.
If you would please talk into them, it just helps with the audio later.
There we go.
Okay, so we are,
We're hooking up the sound.
okay,
We're ready, we're live.
Okay, so, 10 o'clock, Canyon Planning and Zoning Commission meeting a regular session. It's now 8 o'clock. So the first thing, I don't want to really disappoint anybody, but the developer who is going to, that we're going to have discussion about tonight for the Williams property has withdrawn his proposal for tonight. There's work to be done on the development agreement, and so that will not be discussed tonight. We will welcome public input, but we're not making any decisions or talking about it. We're not discussing it. It's not on our agenda. It's not there. So the first item that we're going to talk about is consent item number 3. to approve the July 26, 2021 minutes of the meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
A second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
What minutes are approved in minutes? Under action discussion items, as I mentioned, item number 1, we are not going to have any, it's been removed from the agenda. Item number 2, let me tell you about items 2 and 3. Items 2 and 3 are general discussions of concepts that were discussed in council and in a council workshop and P&Z workshop, and discussed with our town council attorney, and the suggestions, which is all they are at this point, they're suggestions, were the consensus of the group. Obviously, in any group, there'll be some people who disagree with this, disagree with that, whatever. This was the consensus on the whole. And everybody felt that these made sense. They were a good foundation for future discussion. And so the way the process works is these suggestions, is all they are at this point. They would go to our town attorney, who would convert them into an official form of an ordinance, a draft, if you will. Then that would go, Sheila, what's the public notice period?
15 days before the P&Z.
Right, so it'd go out for 15 days in advance. Then we would have a P&Z meeting where we would actually discuss the specific ordinance, not the suggestions, but the specific ordinance. And then assuming, and of course, we public input at that meeting. And then if we approve it, it would go to the town council, to the town councils.
Yeah, with more notice, more notice.
There'll be more notice, more public input at the town council. So that is to say, what we've got here tonight are suggestions, and we're open to people's opinions if you have any. If not, if council has any questions or comments, I would just like to open the floor for, first of all, I guess we might as well open the floor for public comments on those 2 items. And if someone has comments on action item number 1, it is public, and you welcome to make your comments, but again, we're not discussing that item tonight. So with that said, I will open it to the public, and anybody, I've got 3 names here, but it's not clear to me whether they want to speak on what subject they want to speak. So first name is Jeff White. Would you like to take the podium?
I believe it. First off, Jeff Boyd, 4548 Mahogany Lane. Thank you for what y'all do. I mean, seriously, unappreciative, sometimes daunting task that y'all are doing. So I greatly respect y'all volunteering to do that. Thank you for doing that. My 2 questions. One is, did y'all receive, and according to Sheila, y'all did not, Catherine Vexler from the Estates of Copper Canyon sent a request to modify something about the whole issue that's going on. We all know about it, so that land, to make a correction in that. So it is not, she told me it did not go to y'all. It went to, and we'll send it to you if we have a way to get your email address. You're not anywhere I can find. So
And if you give it to Sheila, Sheila can give it to us.
Sheila, you had that email, correct? From Catherine Vexler. Would you share that with them?
Okay.
And then,
Sure.
okay. The only other, that's the meat of the discussion, which will obviously be later on, other people are here to discuss it. The other suggestion or request that I would ask, y'all submitted y'all's meeting agenda Friday or 50-ish for Monday at 8. I know the law says it's 72 hours. Could we in any way make that a 72-hour weekday, not over the weekend? Because if you leave on a Friday and you go to vacation and you're on, and then all of a sudden you're jumping through hoops to try to get all your information. That's just a suggestion. I know the law says 72 hours, it doesn't.
Unfortunately, that's not in our hands, and we have no say on that whatsoever.
Why not?
Oh, because
You're the board, you can adjust any statements they have. Law does not dictate. You
well,
gotta make your own.
the town secretary has to handle that. So
So can you change that, Sheila, instead of being 72-hour notice to 72-hour weekday notice?
The council.
The council can. So I need to go to a council meeting to suggest I make this agenda for them to approve. Then you don't even approve it, it'll be the council. Okay. All I ask, I don't want to do anything other than follow what the ordinance states. And every time I read it, and I send it around, it says 3/4 acre transition lots. And it's to the estates. And I've talked to Mr. Hill, and I'm talking to the ex-mayor, who were both on that committee when it happened. That the intent of that was to have a 3/4 acre transition lot between the estates of Copper Canyon and whatever happens. I don't own the land, I get it, they can do whatever they want, but if it does stay in there, 3/4 acre transition lot, I think it's only fair to follow that as the ordinance reads. Mr. Hill said 100% that is the intent. Ms. Sue, Mayor Sue, said she does not recollect, and she did not vote on it because she was a mayor. But I promise, if there's a consensus, we say 3/4 acre transition lot for the estate. There's only one estate over there. Just follow the rules. I know y'all do a great job. I'm not judging anybody. I know you take a lot of criticism. Totally respect you. I mean, Mark, you've done a great job. All y'all are doing stuff through the citizens. Thank you.
I will say that at the meeting, when we discuss this next time, whether it's next meeting or in the future, we will have our council here to address those issues. Because again, we need to go by what the rules are and as interpreted by our legal attorney and in our best judgment. So it helps to have legal counsel to address those specific questions of intent.
Respect that. Thank you for your time, guys. Appreciate it, man.
Secondly, Ms. Newton.
Can I ask you a question before my time?
Sure.
I just wanted to know, why was, the line action pulled?
The developer, we need to work with the developer more to round out his development agreement. If you recall the last meeting, there's an agreement between the town and the developer that kind of more specifically outlines what he's agreed to do and what we're demanding that he do. That needs more work. We had a draft of that, but it's not complete. There's more to be done. And so that's why it's pulled. It's not gone away. It's just, there's more work to be done.
Only, and that's a very general answer that you're giving. I'm just asking in terms of, are you unwilling to be some specific?
I don't have the specifics. What you heard is what I know.
Okay.
I would
Is
tell
it
you,
more on his part or your part?
it's on both, actually. There's points that he wanted to change, and there's points that we wanted to change. I'm told, I don't know what those points are.
Okay.
Honestly.
Well, I'm happy to have you talk.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll just.
But listen,
Okay, obviously, I'm Jay at 4553 Mahogany Lane. I think I got a little emotional last time, I apologize. It's very close to heart. And so maybe I'll just touch on some of those factual points this time, tonight. Obviously, there's some text talk issues I'd love to hear about, in terms of, those interest points. I think that those are things that we both probably are concerned about. Subject numbers. I don't like the idea of subject systems failing behind my house. I specifically, there are 4 property lines that touch mine. I know that we're not talking about them tonight, but I just want to come every time that I get an opportunity to talk to you because they're concerns. I want to know, I think there was just a little bit of a whisper. Who knows, there's lots of talk, right? In terms of whether or not there's zoning changes and whether that'll happen. Obviously, I think Jeff touched on that, whether there's 2 parts. I would like to know whether or not what would be said if neighbors would be notified. Not every neighbor is here, and there's a lot of people.
Yes, the zoning requirements, I have to notify everybody within 200.
Okay, awesome. The other thing is, I think that there are some things that the developer was showing in terms of like house to house, in terms of, I think it's a deed, it's one of his paperwork. I don't have it tonight, but I can show you if the time comes. It's not like for like, he shows a house on a house. It would be like 3 houses on my house on one of his things, so it's not relative. And if there is a 2-story house, or they're looking at a 1-story house, the elevation is not what it looks like. And if he's planting 2 trees, it would take 20 years for that to shield anything on my house. So there's, it is interesting, when you're talking in general, and I would be curious to see if I touched on any of those points. I was there during, is it P&Z or whatever that meeting was, where the fire chief or the fire person was
The
there.
DRC meeting.
DRC, thank you. I'm trying to keep up on those particulars. There's lots of committees and lots of meetings that I attend, and try to be very informed as a neighbor. And, I think when, he almost walked at one point, and we're talking about those particulars when he doesn't have access points, it's very concerning, those exit points for those. He's trying to make it work, and, it's worrisome. So I'm definitely trying to be informed as a neighbor as well as, for emergency purposes and some of those things. I'm concerned with you. I thank you for watching out for us.
I also have here next, I think it's Vic, Mailer or Massive? What? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
Can't read the writing.
I'll be brief. Yeah, not very good.
Your address. Station.
Oh,
Your address.
1021 Valley Court. It's in the small lots on North Chapel. Basically, I'm going to talk about the accessory structures regulation. I'm reading through this.
You're talking about the suggestions or the existing regulations?
The
Suggestions,
yeah. It seems to me, you talk about unattractive and oversized buildings on small lots to protect Copper Canyon, keep it rural. That's in the second paragraph. Seems to me like if I put a big red barn in the back of my building, that would be more rural than a couple of accessory buildings. I guess and I guess my other question is who's gonna determine whether something's unattractive? I think it's not that I'm gonna build anything, but I just think it's harmful for the people in the areas with less than 2 acres to be limited and to change the regulations. I don't know why it's necessary. It also says it does not attempt, it does not adequately protect the town from oversized accessory structures on smaller lot sizes. So there again, we're talking smaller lot sizes. Seems to me in reading through this that most of the changes benefited the larger landowners. Were harmful to the smaller. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
I guess, just so I can address it. I think the important thing is not what this says, but what the ordinance actually says. Because obviously it depends on, it's like making sausage, right? You kind of want to taste the sausage, not watch it made. So I suggest that you be prepared with those comments when we see the drafted ordinance to see if that is still applicable to what the ordinance comes out with.
Sure, thank you.
Those are the only names I had listed. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment?
Maybe Sheila.
Oh,
Sorry, that's a shame.
all right, so I don't know which one came first, Robin or Nancy who came first.
Robin, it doesn't matter.
So Nancy can do the cleanup everything.
So I'm Robin Douglas Davis, 581 Jordan. I'm sure you know I was on the council and attended this workshop. I think the issue that brought this up was there was an accessory building built on a property that was just over 2 acres, and it was a fairly large accessory building, and there were people in town that were upset by that. And that's what brought the issue up to begin with. So I think that that's something we have to think about. During my time in council, I heard a lot from the people that live in areas where they have 1 acre lots. And those regulations have changed over time, several different times, and people were frustrated by that. So I think that to keep in mind that those people have rights as well as larger landowners. One thing that I really disagree with in here is our divisions. I think we have too many divisions. So, I think once you get to 5 acres, there are enough equestrian and cattle and more rural type establishments or residences and people with acreage. I think that you should look at making the regulations be 5 acres and over, and everything be the same from 5 acres up. So, thank you.
Again, speaking somewhat out of turn, as the person who gathered all this stuff and wrote that memo, I can tell you there was no intention to favor large landholders. In fact, the goal here was to try and reduce. I know it seems odd to do a regulation to reduce things, but to open things up, to make this more accessible to rural rather than less. So, I think one of the challenges this town has had is that too many of our ordinances, going back into the mist of time before any of us got involved, were written for a very big city like Flower Mound. Literally, they took Flower Mound's ordinances and said, okay, we'll just put them here. And frankly, we don't have curbs, we have bar ditches, right? We don't have nice little square neighborhoods, we have weird shaped lots and railroad tracks and creeks. So part of the objective here, which may not have been achieved, I can see, the objective was to loosen things up and to make things more open for the citizens of the town, rather than tighten things up. So it's kind of counterintuitive thinking. So that was the intent. So just so you know.
I don't think it's counterintuitive at all. I think it's what the direction we should be going. I think we just need to read our suggestions in detail and see if they're really taking us that way, or if maybe they're taking us the other direction.
That's right. Nancy?
I'm Nancy Henry. I live at 761 Lonesome Duck Lane, Copper Canyon. I want to thank all of you for your duty and being on the P&Z. I know it's hard. I used to be president of the National Akita Club, and I know what it's like to be on the block up there and everybody after you. I agree with Robin. We don't need to separate the people like over in Rolling Acres, the Woodlands and that from the larger landowners, and treat everybody fairly. I read the proposals you had on their mark, and I also listened in on the workshops, except one time I was out of town. We have to remember we're a rural community. We don't want to be an HOA like Lincoln County or anybody else with all these rules. White people moved here. And I was curious how many people have complained, is it in writing? And if we kept a log about it, because, we wouldn't want a few dictating to the rest of the residents to change ordinances for that. That was one of the points. And I was glad to see we're going to continue to get this out to everybody else, because a lot of people moved here with the previous ordinances, and they would need to know, if anything was going to be changing. Thank you.
Can I clarify something? I want to make sure that you understand that I meant that the restrictions for 10 acres and above should be the restrictions for 5 acres.
Okay, let's take one division out. Okay.
No difference between those.
Between 10 and 5.
So it should just be 5 or
5 and up should have all the 10 regulations.
So whatever we have for 10 should go down to 5.
Exactly.
Not 5 should go up to 10.
it shouldn't
Exactly.
discriminate.
Pardon?
Shouldn't have any discrimination there.
Yeah,
On
I think the rules for 10 are really reasonable for the rules to be the rules for 5.
There really isn't much difference.
There isn't much difference. The
It
concept,
does limit some things, and when you start looking at barns and loafing sheds and, I think that it gets
But it's certainly worth looking at. There was logic behind it. It was a year ago, so I'm not clear on my own mind what the logic was.
I remember because I felt like that should have been an issue at the time, and I was gonna bring it up when we discussed it again, and it just didn't happen.
So it's certainly open for discussion. These were only suggestions, not any formal ordinance. Okay, Chris? Wake up.
I'm looking at it right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't print out the whole thing.
So, by the way, so Chris is our town engineer, and so we make sure that he's on top of all of this and that he's, we're not trying to come up with, invent new things that the town hasn't done before, or, anyway, so just so you know, our town engineer is also reviewing all of this, as its process.
What was the difference between 5 and 10?
That's what I'm just looking at.
Limit on the number, with 5 versus
Yeah,
10 is more open to whatever you're.
I'm sorry?
Can you locate the accessory building information that you are?
It was it's online on the website.
I got
So if you have 5 acres, you can have 5 minor and 3 major accessory. That's a lot.
Well, we're talking about some properties that are quite large.
I mean, this is a very flexible and very lenient.
Yeah, the goal was here to open this up.
Yeah,
This
this is
is more.
accessory buildings on 5 acres. I mean, that, what more do you want?
So
It could be 10,
from
because
an,
it's 5 to 10.
from an agricultural standpoint, it is 200 square feet is nothing. So if you've got a hay
That's
barn,
just minors.
Those are minors.
Those are just minors.
There's no limit on the largers.
no limit on
Acres.
larger accessory buildings for 5.
It's a percentage of the lot size. So up to
And that
2%.
shouldn't be an issue.
I mean, this was intended to be very generous.
I mean, you gotta compare this with the original.
Oh, the original is.
But I mean, you read the original and you go, we gotta do something to
Yeah,
clean
that's
this
the
up.
issue.
And
I
that
just
was what
don't,
Nancy
I don't
brought up.
see that there's any really difference between 5 or 6 acres and 10.
If you have 7 acres, you really have 8 buildings on it, plus a house.
Well,
More than that. I mean, you're gonna need more than 8 buildings and a house.
I don't know that people really are, but if you have 7 acres and you have 8 buildings, it's not really different than having 10 acres.
Well, if you've got 100 acres,
But it doesn't say.
You may
100
need-
acres.
you may
It says
need more
10.
than
It
8
says
buildings.
10 plus.
It's 10,
There's a
she said
difference.
not, don't separate 5
Yeah,
to
she's saying-
9.9 and
you're saying do unlimited buildings on 5.01 acres.
Yeah, and I don't think,
That's what she said.
you're limited
Oh,
by your square foot, your percentage of your square footage. So I think that's enough limit. Because really, that's what your goal is. Your goal is to not have it look like a city block, right?
Yes, yes.
So that achieves your goal. It gives people the ability to do what they need.
But how does that comport with having it rural if you've got 8 to 10 buildings on a 5-acre lot? I
I'm
don't
not
care
saying.
what size they are.
I'm not saying you are, but if you have breeding mares and you've got a mare and a foal and you've got them separated, you've got, 4 loafing sheds on 9.9 acres, that's not too many. But
The problem is in years, so for the record, you want to fill out one.
No.
They started 520 or 625 at the state driving and 770 no. So I would say the problem that we've seen in town in the 31 years I've been here, 23 in the town itself, I would say the biggest problem we have is if you don't put a regulation on, people go crazy. And they build all kinds of stuff that you sit there and go, oh my God, what did we do? Because we didn't regulate it, right? I'm not saying jam on a bunch of regulations, but when you have 5 and 10 and 8 buildings on a 5-acre lot versus a 10-acre lot or higher, it makes a huge difference.
so your limit here, I believe, is 3.
The problem is here, that I moved here to this town and I couldn't even build one. And I have a 1,200 square foot addition to my house, but I couldn't even get one.
But that's your neighborhood
So in
restriction, it's not.
In this accessory,
That's your neighborhood.
exhibit A, suggestions for
It is.
accessory structures regulations, 5 to 10 says you may not have more than 3 major buildings. And like I said, if you've got 4 loafing sheds, you're over the limit.
Major.
It's also defined in the.
Yeah.
in the second.
It's anything 201 square feet, so 20 by 10.
It's more,
That's
it's,
kind of like
it's more than this, it's big.
combined total of 3 majors, plus all of the minors, up to 2% of your property.
But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you look at exhibit A, it says that you may not have more than 3 major accessory buildings.
Right.
So if you have 4 loafing sheds, you're over the limit. So you can have 9.9 acres
Why is the loafing shed major? I don't understand.
because it's over 200 square feet. It's bigger than 20 by 10.
Then you need to make it 19 by 10. I mean, I'm honestly, Robin, I get it, but
But she's a big property owner. so-
But
Yeah.
it's an agricultural issue. Is this an agricultural, I mean, so if you have a detached garage, you can't have 3 loafing sheds because
is that what you
now,
consider a major?
because it would be considered a major accessory building. So now you've got too many, or if you've got a barn
So would you
and a
say,
detached garage,
would you propose, I'm putting words in your mouth, but it just came into my head, about making them agriculturally related, so your garage wouldn't count? If you had a detached garage, that's not gonna count in these accessory buildings, agriculturally related out minor or
I think
major?
we're gonna get in a lot of semantical people, it's, a lot of people can
Yeah,
finesse that.
so I just think that
Tractor.
5 to 10 acres is.
This is, okay, so, I'm sorry, just let me respond to the question. She said, what is a major building? A major building may not exceed the greater of 50% of the first floor area of the principal dwelling. You've got a house that's a lot,
thousands would be,
or 2% of the lot size, or 2,000 square feet. It can't exceed the greater of those 3 items. So a major building is
Like
2,000 square feet, or
so if you have a barn, your barn is bigger than, my barn's is bigger than my house. But I got a little house.
or an indoor ring.
Yeah, if you have an indoor arena, you're toast. So, and that's why people moved here, is to be able to have an indoor arena. And from agricultural law and tax law, agricultural tax law, you need, each of your buildings has to have its own individual purpose. You don't want to put hay in your stall barn because they're 2 separate things and you can't deduct them that way. So, and from a safety standpoint, you don't want to put your hay in the same barn where you've got your stall, because your hay catches on fire and now your horses are dead. I mean, there's just some agricultural issues here that you ignore when you say that anything between 5 and 10, you're looking at it as a residential issue and not an agricultural issue. And people moved here to be able to have their horses, their cows, and have the rest
so
of it agricultural.
who's good with math? What's 2% of 10 acres?
But it's not
Square
just
feet.
the 2%,
And you can
it's
have
the
3 of
fact,
them.
it's the fact that you're saying that you've limited the square footage of a major building. It may not be over, i.e. the 2%, but it also may not be over 50% of your
No, it was the
Yeah,
greater,
residents or.
the greater of the 3. So 2% of your lot, if you've got 10 acres, would certainly be larger than some portion of your house. So you can have 3 of those, that's 6% of your property would be in major buildings. So that's.
So what happens if you have 4 major buildings?
Well, what happens if you have 6 or 8 or, I mean,
Or 400?
or 400? I mean,
You do run into a problem with the indoor arena, or hay.
How many indoor arenas are there?
on acres, properties of less than
And
10.
aren't there,
We don't have any, but believe me, they're out I mean, we've got an Argyle, we've got in Bartonville.
So
we've got
here,
hundreds of
I
people.
can think of
People with more than 10
three
acres.
Right,
indoor
and
lanes.
She's just,
You know,
she's just saying if I own 10 acres and I want an indoor arena, I can't build one.
So, like, I can think of three indoor
Because
lanes
it's
in
going to be
town.
too
just off
big.
the top.
No, there's no limit on.
No,
acres.
well, and say she's 9.9 acres.
Oh,
She wouldn't be able to put an indoor arena on it. And an indoor arena doesn't have to be, I mean, it can be, you know, different sizes. But she has a point that it's something she would use for her horses and she can't build it because of,
but we don't have any indoor arenas in Cover
we
County.
don't
Yeah,
have it now.
we do.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at least three that I can think of. That was four.
Well,
Just off the top of my
this has
head.
no impact on existing property.
Yeah.
This has no impact on existing properties.
I guess the point I was trying to make, is
I
those are
understand
typically
that.
people are gonna have 10 acres or more. That have an indoor
Could
arena,
be.
right?
But
that's
then they
okay.
wouldn't be, but the way that's structured, it would, we wouldn't be able, they would not be able. to
My
get
experience
theirs.
in this kind of stuff is you end up debating the abnormalities, not
Yeah.
the realities.
Well, it's
It's
like,
a thought, I mean, it's a thought.
I mean, you know, that's,
And there is an exception process, right?
yeah, we got one of the various people right here. in the room.
What is it right now? I mean,
I can come with it right now. Oh, well, it's
right now, I'm not sure it's limited.
It's an exhibit. Whatever.
Over 10 acres, it's not.
Yeah, over
That actually, right now, I don't know that over 2 acres.
currently exists.
Wait, what's the question?
Yeah, it's in your book,
My question was,
exhibit B, it's the currently existing, accessory
we don't
building
limit size.
ordinance.
Here, you can be as big as you want.
Oh, okay. Just by the,
In
just
tab.
by the permit fee for it, to permit an indoor arena.
So,
So you were talking about bringing this up over from Flower Mound, so you were bringing them from Flower Mound to bring a lot of this stuff that is happening. So some of the language, as I was talking to you, when we moved over here to do some of what we were doing when we moved here, is we chose to live here in order to build an accessory building. That's actually what we did.
So you're saying I'm sorry, I'm lost on what your point is. You want to say you like Flower Mound regulations?
We chose to live here instead of living in Florida. I'm saying that as we chose to work with builders, we chose to move here. We were looking to live here instead of like Double Oak, or instead of Flower Mound, or instead of, we chose to live here because of the way the wording was here. And what I'm saying is that as you look at this language, and as we were looking, one of the particulars is that the language that became difficult was the language that talked about why we needed to have an attached, addition versus a detached building. And I know what he was saying, that one of the things was like the HOA that we live in also came into play. But in particular, we were working with a builder, and we had to comply with what your particular city required. And as she's talking about agricultural type things and how that comes into play with larger, acreage, some of the language that originally comes from like Flower Mound and how that comes into play. One of the things that comes into play is what looks like, say, a pool house versus what makes it habitable, what makes a pool house versus the language that is used with what we have. And one of the things that became a difficulty, and we had this come into play as I work with like an architectural committee in my particular neighborhood. We had somebody that applied for a pool house. Is the difference between, and Sheila and I talked, this is one of the things that was a difficulty for us. And that's why I'm here kind of asking questions with you as we're looking at how you're.
The intention here was to solve that problem.
Yes, absolutely.
So
because
I
whether it
think
comes
we've
to
addressed
actually-
that, so I'm
Yeah,
not
no,
following
I'm
what you're
asking
doing.
whether it
You're
comes-
telling us we've done a good job, you're saying we've done a bad job, or you got.
Neither, it's just seeking understanding
Okay, yes.
to ask,
goal here-
like, it's for you to solve that, and whether a cooktop works, or whether a cooktop doesn't work in an accessory building, and whether that makes it habitable. I'm with you,
Yes.
I'm with you in that confusion, because it made it very difficult.
That was one of the objectives here, is those things are prohibited, and we are trying to open that up to make that, again, this goes to the point of trying to be more open rather
Yeah,
than
I'm
less.
with you.
So that, and again, I'm not saying it's perfect and it's
No, no,
accomplished
no,
that, but that was true.
I'm not for you, against you, with you, or whatever, I'm saying,
You're just making a
we
point
would,
about it.
we too would have had a detached and would have done whatever we wanted and all that. Is, you know, and I guess my question to you is, are you wanting to open it up? Because in that, well, listen, by opening it up, in that, do you want Copper Canyon to be, because then that makes it the potential for it to be a multi-family dwelling.
That's, it.
Is that what you want?
It depends on what you mean by a multifamily lot. Is it your son and daughter-in-law living in the house behind you? Is that multifamily or is that the same family? What about your mother-in-law? Is
But the
that,
problem is when you build it, and let's say you build it for your son or your daughter or what have you, that's great when you're living there, but when you sell it, it now becomes too independent, number one. Number two, there are more and more people, even though our ordinances restrict having the Airbnb in here.
Yeah.
There's 2 houses in our neighborhood where they've changed it over to an Airbnb, and it's horrific, it's horrible. If you ever lived next to an Airbnb.
no,
or
you do not want Airbnb. It's not gonna go on through the Airbnb.
No, but I'm saying,
It's not-
but if you get it, you allow them to go ahead and put in the stove and the ovens and the refrigerators and pretty soon that accessory building, that quote unquote accessory building becomes a livable building and it's a joke because it becomes the building they
I
rent
wasn't
out
trying
to
to,
Airbnb.
I wasn't trying to start fighting, I just was seeking understanding so that I could then ask you, is that in our small town, in our rural, and what we're trying to see as a small, is that what we're trying to do?
We're not trying to turn our town into an Airbnb community, number one. Number two,
Right.
you can't stop people from doing things unless you want to have an enforcement division that goes and throws the bums out. So, you know, if you want to hire a police force that will now enforce, you know, and knock on your door and say, who are you? Show me your ID. Why are you in this house? This is a problem. Every community has it. Every community has it throughout the world. And, you know, all I do is zoning. I don't do enforcement.
Mark, if you're not enforcing it, then why bother loosening up the regulations? There's no reason.
Because there are people who would like to have their mother-in-law stay in the house. And right now, we allow servants and guards to have a cooking facility. Why don't we allow the mother-in-law to have a cooking facility? So instead of building a mother-in-law house, build a guard shack in your backyard. There you go. Now you can cook it.
Flower
It
mountain,
makes no sense.
well, I guess because flower mountain only allows local house, that for a reason, so that doesn't happen, I'm just asking why we don't do that, to allow that, you know, so that doesn't happen. I'm just seeking understanding, I'm not trying to.
Feel free to read the ordinance when the lawyers present it and present your specific comments on those items. Next meeting, hopefully, coming attractions. Because right now, these are suggestions,
Okay.
and many
But
people
the goal
have
is,
had
the
input.
goal
in it.
is to open it up, is what you're saying.
I'm sorry.
The goal is to open it
The
up.
goal is to open it up and make it, I mean, you read the memo, it's on the board, on the website,
That's
and
fine.
it talks about the logic behind it and why it makes some sense to open this up based on other existing ordinances that we have in place.
And you would say to open it up for accessory buildings of that nature over an acre?
I'm sorry?
Open it up to that level for an accessory building over an acre?
Uh,
Would you see it like for the neighborhood that's like 5 acres, right? And it is small?
I think it's, well, you can see it's in here, it's for everyone. I mean, you can have accessory buildings. Everybody can have accessory buildings, it's just a number, it's not the fact that you can or can't have.
Okay.
I mean, you don't want,
I was trying to find it.
you don't want 3 big houses in the back of a half-acre lot.
Look at exhibit A, it's very detailed.
Exhibit A, I'm
Exhibit A.
trying to find it. I apologize, I'm trying to find it and get it pulled up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's a long number.
I'm a little tired.
So again, we have a long period of time before we're actually going to see it. It'll be out public notice. It'll be at least 2 weeks, 15 days of the specific ordinance. We'll have specific language in it. And then that will be what everybody can shoot bullets at.
Thank you.
One kind of question,
Mhm.
because didn't find it, and it's maybe in here, is talking about specifically larger properties that if you were going to go, I'll take Robin, for instance. Robin has, making this up, I don't know what you have, I think it's 11 acres. 1 acre is your house, because that's typically the way you do it. The way it was written before, you had to have a residence on the property you would put in your barn. And we talked about taking that out,
But based on the size of the lot.
based on the size.
That was one of the.
I think it was, I remember it was less than 5, you still had to have the residence.
Right, and that-
Greater than
well,
5, if I remember,
Yeah.
without looking at it again.
Yeah.
That was the intention, because
Yeah.
some property is literally used to grow hay.
Yeah.
So you need accessory buildings there, but you don't
Exactly,
need.
but we did take that, I just.
Yes, I think we did. That was the objective, is to understand that we do have large agricultural properties that don't have a residence on them, but they need to have barns and hay and
One, for
greens.
instance, I'm at 70 pieces. of
Well,
what
and
was.
if you think about it, so people who are agricultural know that before you build your house, when you buy your property, the first thing you do is you build a barn. That I mean, I'm 58 years old and I've never seen it any other way.
Yeah.
So,
And you also often, speaking of tax right here, often you have your house and 1 acre separated from the rest of it, because that's not ag, the rest of it.
We also, I think we also talked about, somewhere, and that was one of the questions, was combining people's properties, you own several properties.
Yeah,
Contingent with each other, those are treated as
So
one.
you have
They,
3 2-acre lots, you go ahead 6.
it's on this exhibit A, right there,
It is,
footnote at the bottom, F. First note, for lots of 5
Okay.
acres or greater, installation of accessory buildings does not require the
I just
presence of
flat missed it.
residential
Thank
use.
you.
The property for 5 acres or larger does not require.
Did we address what Mitch just said? Is that in there about if you have contiguous properties that you're actually,
There's I saw something when I was going through.
Yeah.
it's in there that you're the greater number of homes, so
Yeah.
rather than having
If you
2
own
and a
multiple
5
lots,
and a
you treat
7,
it
she's
as
really.
aggregate, you have to.
Yeah, okay.
And again, that was the concept of, like you said, a lot of people do have separate properties and they're different
But it's all
islands.
You've actually got it,
fenced in.
you've got it in bold on page 5.
Okay, well, there you go. Oh,
Next
okay.
No, it's a lot in there.
Yeah.
there's one.
It's the second paragraph on
There's
page
a lot.
5.
And it is difficult reading, trying to decide what was and what is and what's proposed.
Right,
So,
right.
But and I think part of it is Mark tried to put his thoughts into it, and that also makes it a little more complicated than just reading the final proposal.
Well, it's-
right?
it's-
Well,
That's what Mark was saying.
Here's what the
We get
discussion
finals,
was.
right.
Here are what the points are, here's what it would look like, and here's what the changes are, and here's what it would look like without the,
Yeah.
clean, and then here's what we got now, so
So
it's
it's
all
cleaner
cleaner
when you look at a final.
when you look at the final, it's all in one place, you just have to read through it. And if you think it's fun to
Those are my
read,
2 questions, and
you
it's
think
worth
it's fun to
writing.
read, try writing it.
Just for color commentary, you did a great job.
Yeah, you did.
I mean, if you read their original ordinances, they're very problematic.
Yes.
And this
Yeah, this is-
clarifies a lot.
This is an area that's been crying out for changes, of course, not everybody will like all of them, but it's been crying out for years. And even Mayor Sue and people like that said, we need to change this, she said that 8 years ago, so.
It's also very generous. I can't imagine anybody with 8 accessory buildings on there.
I don't,
5
it's,
acres.
and it's not the total number, it's you can only have 3 majors, and the major accessory building for anything with an agricultural use, it's gonna be a major building.
Well, to be honest, well, not to be honest, I'm always honest. To be clear, I actually talked, I didn't tell her why I was asking her, but I talked to Deborah, what's the size of your barn, what's the size of your riding, how tall is it, remember?
Right.
I asked her all of these things, and that was part behind this, was to say, if Deb walked in today and said, I want these barns, and I want that riding unit, could she do it? And the answer was yes. So I figured that was pretty good.
And that's good. One person, I think we need to look at more than just one person, though. I mean,
Well, she's got a big riding. unit,
2
and a
more
big barn.
acres, 2 more acres, but
but you see, the people who have horses and cows and that sort of thing, and who do that for a money-making proposition, you understand, right?
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's hard, but it's.
Sorry to people actually
Well, I
make
mean,
money on it.
I mean, yeah.
I never invested anything that has 4 legs.
Hard to make money on that.
Yeah, hard to make money.
But, I mean, when you get 5 acres or less, or 2 acres or whatever, I mean, you're still limited in the number of animals per acre.
I think
So there's-
anytime you put, regardless of where you put the line, it's gonna be difficult. Because somebody's gonna be on one side of the line and somebody's gonna be on the other.
Well, we can't fix everything for everybody all the time, 100% of the time. If we
I'm
can
not
get
saying we
90
should.
if we can get 80 or 90% there, but the reality of it is, when you start looking at this, and Mark and I did talk about it, you're all limited by the number of animals that you can have if it's truly ag.
How many stalls do you have?
I've got 55,
So, and how many acres do you have?
27, 28.
So you've got approximately, enough room for a horse for every half.
Yeah,
So,
that's if I'm 100% full.
Right. Let's hope you're on.
But
It's better for you.
and so just to put in a plug for our fellow citizens, this is why we have a board of adjustments. You come to them and ask for variances if you need it. And so we gotta keep them busy, they get bored with nothing to do. So that's part of it here too. So as Deb says, we can't solve everything for everybody 100% of the time up front.
Isn't it safe to say though, if you've got 5 acres, instead of doing 3 minors and 2 majors, you do 3 majors, but it's still less than 2% of the lot size?
Right. And that's each one is less than.
That's gonna get
Right.
signed off.
Yeah, each one's less than 2, so yeah, so.
So there's flexibility in this for
I
yours.
mean, it was intended to be flexible.
I'm just saying that don't limit the number of large accessory buildings. Maybe if you keep all of them under 2%, then that's reasonable.
Okay, thank you. Good discussion. Okay, so let's talk about flag lots. Who wants to talk about the flag lots?
I got one of those too.
Yeah. So, anybody have discussion on flag lots, comments that we can send off to the attorney as part of the discussion?
There was no other changes. since we-
No, there's been no changes since day one.
Yeah,
I
okay,
mean, most people went flag lots,
yeah. No, I think we made
All right,
other things with it that we needed to do.
okay, well, thank you, public, for attending and helping us with this process. It is a process, which we try to go through. Any other discussion, Sheila, we have to cover?
Maybe so, John.
Thank you. Second, all in favor? Aye. We officially adjourned at 12:09. Okay, so everybody who's here, please, again, keep your eyes on the emails or the notices